placed in our hands, our children, to raise them in a certain way. Imagine if there's a coach who, the parent gives the coach his child, he's a tennis coach, and a basketball coach. And he says, I want you to teach my child how to play basketball. And the coach, instead of teaching the child how to play basketball, teaches the kid how to play piano. It's great. Who doesn't love piano? Piano's great. But that's not what they were entrusted for. They were entrusted to play basketball. They were entrusted for a certain thing. God entrusted our Jewish children with us as Jewish parents, and he wants us to raise them as Jewish kids. This is really, when you boil it down, the idea of Jewish continuity, this is what it means. And so it might be a wonderful thing to learn how to play piano. We have all these universal ideas that we want to instill in our children, but that is not yet enough. And more important than that, it's not only our obligation to God that he gave us these children, that we ought to raise them as Jews. It's our obligation to our children. It's who they are. It's their right. It's their heritage. It's who they are. So you can ask, well, who said? What does it make it theirs? Or why should I impose my belief system on my children? Who am I to impose my belief system on them? And they might even tell you that. They may even say that to you. So imagine, in terms of imposing, imagine your daughter decides that she doesn't want to go to school. Somebody mentioned the obligation to go to school, right? She doesn't want to. She, or she doesn't want to behave like a mensch, a societal, normal, healthy human being. So, presumably, we would force our kids, we would tell our kids, you have to go anyway, it doesn't matter what you want to do. We would insist on a certain mode of behavior. So what gives us our right to impose our beliefs, I'm talking now first about younger children, because as they get older, this is very much a changing environment. The same thing with menschliche behavior. If we do so simply because we're bigger and stronger, isn't this some kind of form of abuse? And the answer is no, of course not. We demand of our kids to go to school, we demand of our kids to be a mensch, and we do everything within our power to help make that happen. And the same thing, we ought to do the same thing when it comes to their Judaism. We have to employ all of our wiles to try to help them do that. So we're going to talk about how we do that. If we use that athlete example, imagine that your kid is Michael Jordan, and you gave him to the coach to teach him basketball, and instead they taught him piano. And they might be great Michael Jordan might be great at piano. But he's Michael Jordan. He has it in him. He's a basketball player. He is the best basketball player that ever lived. Well, we can debate that later. With LeBron, right? So, we can debate that. But clearly one of the best. Our kids' Yiddishkeit, our kids are the Jewish Michael Jordans. They're the Michael Jordans of Judaism. Those are our children. God gave them to us to help them become, to bring out that talent, that innate neshama that they have, that they've been given. It's theirs. It's not us imposing on them. When we extract a talent that our children have, we're not imposing on them. We are parenting. We are helping them become and be the absolute most that they can be. That's our role. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to help them become the Michael Jordans of Judaism, because that's who they are. That's who their neshama is. It's a tragedy when somebody doesn't fulfill their potential. How many people have you seen, or that you know, that we look at and we say, this person, they have such unbelievable traits, and nebuch, they never believed in themselves. They never allowed themselves to express it. And that's like a terrible, it's a terrible shame when that happens. Because they had everything going for them. They have all the talent. And they simply, whether they didn't believe in themselves or somebody else didn't believe in themselves or they had a bad experience or whatever it is, and they never figured out how to get it together. That's what we're talking about. So Jewish parenting, as we discussed when it came to universal goals, when it comes to Jewish goals, we're talking about creating self-sufficiency when it comes to Judaism. So the successful Jewish parent is one who creates successful Jews. That's what it means. That's Jewish parenting. It's not just Jewish values of parenting, but that's the Jewish parenting. So we can't be satisfied just with a bar bat mitzvah or going to Hebrew school or even going to a day school. That's not enough. It's not enough. We want that they have to be independently Jewish. That's what we're looking for. And as we know, it's not an easy task. It's very difficult, particularly in today's day and age. It's very, very hard. Let's take a look at Dershowitz here on page 170, if somebody will volunteer for us. Yes, go ahead, Ruby.
American Jewish life.
You got to speak up, though.
Oh, sorry. American Jewish life is in danger of disappearing. Just as most American Jews have achieved everything we ever wanted, acceptance, influence, affluence, equality, as a result of skyrocketing rates of intermarriage and assimilation, as well as the lowest birth rate of any religious or ethnic community in the United States, the era of enormous Jewish influence on American life may soon be coming to an end. One Harvard study predicts that if current demographic trends continue, the American Jewish community is likely to number less than 1 million and conceivably as few as 10,000 by the time the United States celebrates its tricentennial in 2076. Other projections suggest that early in the next century, American Jewish life as we know it will be a shadow of its current vibrant self, consisting primarily of isolated pockets of ultra-Orthodox Hasidim. Jews have faced dangers in the past, but this time we may be unprepared to confront the newest threat to our survival as a people, because its principal cause is our own success as individuals. Our long history of victimization has prepared us to defend against those who destroy us out of hatred. Indeed, our history has forged a Jewish identity far too dependent on persecution and victimization by our enemies. But today's most serious threats come not from those who would persecute us, but from those who would, without any malice, kill us with kindness, by assimilating us, marrying us, and merging with us out of respect, admiration, and even love. The spiritual holocaust.
But it's so. This is sort of the dire end of the spectrum. I don't want to scare everybody into, this is like the scare tactics of one. We'll talk about a different reading in a moment, which actually rejects this kind of motivation for it. It's just the point of this reading is not to say that the reason we have to be Jewish is because we're all going to die out. That's not. The Jews are going to be here. We're all going to be here. Your kids are going to be here. God willing, everything is going to be fine. God's been with us. He's going to stay with us. He's not going anywhere. Purim reminds us of that. But it does cause us, it ought to cause us pause and cause us to think and to take seriously the question that we ask here on page 171. What are some of the best practices that parents can implement in their quest to raise proud and self-sufficient Jews? What are some of the best practices that we can implement as parents and in parenting, using parenting? So I'd like to open this up. You want to say something? No, you just raised your hand. All right, you're up. No, go ahead. Anybody? Best practices. Go ahead. Yes.
Joy when we do something Jewish, a mitzvah, something like
Joy that when we do something is excellent. We're going to talk about that at length in a moment. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah.
So for me, it was the experiencing a Jewish community. What is that? I grew up in a completely non-Jewish community, so it was very important that my son would grow up in a very Jewish community.
That's a big deal. Jewish community. Absolutely. Isaac, you want to say something?
for Jewish communities, one environment when you love in Jewish community, the different environment. Being Jew is a third way. So one time in life you have to choose a big, which community what you're gonna be.
want them to choose a Jewish community. Somebody this Friday night at our Shabbos table, somebody said the following story that they heard from their teacher. I loved it, and I promised the guy. I said, I promise you, I'm going to use this story again and again. He said that the teacher was teaching his class, and the teacher said the following story. He said that there was some fellow who used to come to shul regularly, and he stopped coming to shul. He figured, I'm going to daven myself at home. I do everything. It's okay. I know all the prayers, and I know how to do it, and it's fine. I don't need to go to shul to daven. Really, you can daven at home. No big deal. So he does this 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and he's at home, and the rabbi walks into his house. He knocks on the door. The guy opens the door. He walks into his house, and he's sitting in front of, he was sitting on the chair in front of the fireplace. And the rabbi walks over to the fireplace, and he takes the tongs, and he mixes around in the fire, and he takes a single coal, and he puts it right down on the hearth. And he leaves it there, and he puts back the tongs, and he walks out of the house. Isn't that a powerful story? That's the story of Jewish community. I mean, that's powerful. Anybody else? You get it? Okay, we'll explain later. Anybody else? Yeah, what?
Got it.
Anybody else? Yeah, Stuart.
I know this is not going to sound very nice, but all
Try
I
to say it nicely.
All right, because I can only relate to how I was brought up, and ultimately how my feelings are now.
By now, after 6 weeks, we know already.
Yeah, I'll give you.
It's okay.
But what I do know is we were brought up that you married Jewish people. In other words, from the time I was a kid, I mean, talking about grade school, I said, I saw so-and-so. Yeah, she's Jewish. I mean, that was, so there wasn't, to say it in a nice way, is that it was really important that you would be with somebody Jewish. I mean, I'm not taking away from enjoying and dancing and singing and all the nice stuff, but that was the thing. You didn't.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So clearly, there's no question about demographics tell us that we're in a different period of time now. And the question is, how is that type of value instilled? That's the parenting question. The question is, how do we implement, as parents, how do we implement this quest to create proud and self-sufficient Jews? I agree with you that one of the goals would be that our children would marry Jewish, because it's been shown over and over. First of all, that's the mitzvah, and it's not a mitzvah to marry out. But beyond that, the studies have shown over and over and over again that if one is intermarried, you can't bring up Jewish children. Right? That's the studies are unequivocal in terms of the direction of that. So we're talking about parenting and raising self-sufficient Jewish kids. So how do we create that? I understand that your parents did. How did they do it? What did they do?
Okay.
That's transferable.
Because it was something that was wrong. In other words, why were we told not to run in the middle of the street in front of a bus?
So
it was something that was wrong.
It just was.
You don't do it, it's wrong. And today we're afraid to say something's wrong.
Okay, so you think it goes directly to,
Yeah.
You gotta say it's wrong, call a spade, say it like it is, and say it's wrong. Okay, so you believe that what the key element is to tell the kids what's right and wrong and just say it the way it is.
Yeah, at least about that. I mean,
Right.
But yeah.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Yes.
And so I'm going back, trying to think of people, like when we did the Jewish Federation, this survey about like why people connected to the Jewish Federation, Jewish community in Milwaukee. I had some interesting interviews at work with folks who actually went to Hillel and other schools in the community. And one of the guys said to him, what still now connects him and what makes him want to marry Jewish, to your point, was his Shabbases he spent with the Hasidic family, even though he was Reformed.
That's interesting.
That
Why?
his parents, and I asked him like how that was, and he's like, it always bothered my parents that I went with them every Shabbos because they thought it was extreme, and I loved those shows, and that's what now still
Interesting.
kind of keeps that.
I think it
So-
goes back to what Rabbi Kamarov spoke about joy. Maybe that's what he saw, but that's just speculation. We're going to talk more about it. Go ahead.
I was thinking of like celebrating some of the holidays like Sukkot or
Simply to celebrate the Shabbat, the holidays, etc.
and
Good.
maybe sharing with Jews and non-Jews and showing like thank you.
Show our pride in being Jewish. You know, it's not hiding from others. Okay, good. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm just thinking of very broad brushstroke modeling,
Modeling.
Not just sending your kids to a school that teaches Jewish things to learn about it, but living it.
Okay.
We live.
Good.
We
So
show.
modeling is obviously has to be key in all of this. It's not enough to just hear about it, even to learn about it in a book, but to live it, to see it. Good. Yeah.
So I was going to say, in response to him, it's not just what you say, but it's also the situation that you put your child in.
Right.
So, like, for example, myself, I grew up in Ground Deer where there were definitely Jews. And I went to, obviously, schools that didn't have any Jews. So, while my mom could have said, well, go marry a Jew, she didn't put me in a situation that would be very likely. Because I'm not putting enough Jews at my school, which is that
So you're saying
the only
it's
Jews I'm seeing are in Sunday school.
so you're
2 hours a week.
so you're saying that in order to have an environment where that kind of talk works, you have to be living in a community where that's possible.
Right, because like my niece and nephew who go to Nicolay, you tell them, okay, David, they're Jews. Well, that's
There's people
great
around.
because 50% Nicolay is Jewish. So
It's interesting. So this goes back to what Isaac was talking about in terms of community.
right.
In terms of community,
Right.
and
So it's not
Janine.
just what you say, you got to put it into a situation that fosters how you know.
Although my wife went to Tulsa West, where she was one of two. All right? And
All right,
somehow,
listen, again, but you're talking about
It can't happen, but I'm
no, but it's her. What she was told at home,
what?
she had. That was it.
Right. Okay. So
It had nothing to do with
I
where
don't want
she
to. I don't
was.
want to create a debate here. I want to create the end. This is brainstorming here. So we're not gonna argue it. But I think. By the way, Stuart, there's no question about it that studies show over and over and over again. It's the story I told. When somebody's alone, without a community, there's no question that the chances go way down. Listen, I know parents who, and there are many parents who try to do this, and because parents are still paying for college, it's an issue, that they want to make sure that their kids go to a college because that's where kids are creating these relationships, and they want to make sure that they're going to a college where there is a Jewish community. That's a very key factor for a lot of kids, for a lot of parents and kids, that they want to make sure that they're not going to lose that in college, not because they don't care about it, but because circumstances. Anybody else? Anyone want to weigh in before? I'm going to offer two ideas here, in addition to, nobody spoke about, or directly, Jewish schooling, which is, every study shows that going to a Jewish school is very key in helping to maintain Jewish identity. Modeling what goes on in the home, no question about it. It's very hard to judge that against Jewish schooling because very often those homes where they're constantly modeling Jewish life, very often those are the homes that are sending to Jewish schools. So it's hard to, they have not done very many good studies on being able to somehow differentiate where those two things come apart. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to add, I think
Cam?
going there, that the two other pieces, because we've talked about this before, but for me, is one is a trip to Israel,
Israel.
sending your kids to Israel, and the other is Jewish summer camp. Makes a huge
So
difference.
it turns out, though, that Israel is an identifier for Jewish identity, but in terms of creating this idea of self-sufficient Jews, it's not as effective as clearly as some of the other things. Although, again, it definitely keeps that sense alive. And by the way, being in Israel definitely is. If a kid hangs out over there, chances are pretty good that they might find a Jew to marry and hang out with. Not guaranteed, but it's not guaranteed at all. But there's a good chance. There's a good chance. Okay. So in addition to imparting knowledge and making sense of what we do as Jews and why, so education I want to just have a quick word about education, then I'm going to move on to different topics. Remember we spoke about that idea of, when we spoke about that self-image and having self-confidence. It's actually, part of Jewish education is about giving a child a feeling of competence in Judaism. When somebody walks into a shul who's incapable of reading Hebrew or of even knowing what's going on, it's not because they came to shul, they want to, but there's such a feeling of incompetence in that area that it's literally painful to be there. And so much of Jewish education, just going to a Jewish school, is, believe it or not, we're not even talking about self-sufficiency. We're talking about having a basic degree of competence that at least removes the barrier from not feeling comfortable in a Jewish environment. And so a lot of education is simply about competence, simply about knowing what to do. And that's as far as, and the truth is, even knowing why also goes to competence. How can I feel like a self-sufficient Jew if I don't know the reason for anything? It makes it very, very difficult and hard. Okay? Role modeling. Somebody mentioned role modeling. Again, there's no question that role modeling and seeing that and living it is key. I mean, I think that Jewish education doesn't only happen with the knowledge of Judaism, but obviously the knowledge of the house of Judaism. Judaism is so much about hands-on stuff. So those go without saying. I want to, though, present tonight, till the end of our class, two ideas. Two ideas about education in Judaism and about raising self-sufficient Jewish kids. So, when God gave the Ten Commandments, He didn't say to the Jews things like, be a good, believing, kind human being. He got very, very specific. He got very granular and specific. He said, you have to believe in one God and you should have no other gods before me, and you should not kill and not steal and keep the Shabbos. He was very, very, very specific. So we don't tell our children either in educating them. We don't say, I want you to just be, well-mannered and hygienic. We don't say that. We get very, very specific and we say, you have to brush your teeth and you have to wash behind your ears. We get into the details. And the same thing with, we don't just say, I want you to eat nicely. We tell them, I want you to eat with a fork and not with your hands, and use a napkin and these kinds of things. Learn to say thank you. The same is true about a child's Jewish education. It isn't enough to say, I want you to serve God and honor your parents and whatever, but we have to teach them specifics, very specific, and specifics that manifest themselves in action, in doing something. Because from here, the first point that I want to make is the difference between, again, instruction and education. What we're talking about is training, not educating them in the classic sense of imparting knowledge to them, but training them to do Jewish, to train them to do Jewish, to know what to do and to do it. So, interestingly enough, the Mishnah says as follows. It's actually a Tosefta on page 171. When a child no longer clings to his mother, he can walk on his own. We teach him to observe the mitzvah of sukkah. When he's capable of shaking the lulav and esrog, the four species, we train him to take the lulav. When he's capable of dressing himself, we give him tzitzit to wear. As soon as he knows how to speak, his father should teach him the Shema. So what are we talking about over here? We use the term a lot, age appropriate. What's age appropriate in Jewish education? What is age appropriate? And it turns out, age appropriate in Jewish education is not the way some people sometimes think of it in terms of when they can understand what they're doing. No. Age appropriate means when they can do it. As soon as they can do it, get them started. Get them doing it. Doing Jewish. Okay? And that's what age appropriate means. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. You want to know what the right age is, the age appropriateness of things? As they go through a ton of examples, as soon as they can do it. As soon as they can do it, get started. Oh, but they don't know how it works. When we tell our kids to brush their teeth, they don't know about gingivitis, and they don't know about, they think bugs are growing in their teeth, and they might get a cavity, and then they have to sit with it by the dent. They don't understand why. We teach them to do it as soon as they can brush their teeth, as soon as they can figure it out. We get them going. So this is in terms of, it's about capability. As soon as they're capable, we do it, way before they understand. Text 7. As soon as, or the purpose of education is to habituate children to certain behaviors. So that when they grow up, it has already become second nature. We're looking for chinuch from the term habituation, habit, getting them used to it. Same thing, again, brushing teeth is a perfect example. We want, remember we used the term before with diapers, with Pampers. We want that a child automatically, by the time they're a certain age, they don't go to sleep without brushing their teeth. They know they brush their teeth. That's just something that they know. That's something that they do. We want that they're not coming up one day and feeling like, I have a big choice to make. Am I going to start or stop brushing my teeth? It's habit. This is what they do. We want that it should be natural for a child to brush their teeth, and it should be natural for a child to do Jewish. We want to create Jewish behavior patterns. This should be the default. The default behavior pattern ought to be a Jewish behavior pattern. So behavior patterns are created by behavior. That's how they're created. They're created by doing. So this is, the difference between teaching Judaism or training Judaism. It's about training them. And so that starts from the youngest age. And the point of training, when a person trains over and over and over, what happens is, yes, at some point in their life, they can opt out. They can always opt out. There's no guarantees. But make no mistake about it, it's opting out versus opting in. Right now, the vast majority of Jewish kids, when they grow up, they have to make the choice to opt in. It's going against the grain. And yes, while there are many children, unfortunately, who do opt out of Judaism, that is the minority, not the majority. It's like the difference between, anyone who's done any mass emailing, or, we've spoken about this in some of our medical ethics classes about, countries that have changed the organ donation stuff on the back of the license. They had this crisis, there weren't enough organs. So they woke up and they said, we have a great idea. Instead of having people opt in, have them opt out. And all of a sudden, the numbers skyrocketed. And it was the same amount of people who looked at it. It's on the form. You gotta look at it. You sign your name to it. But the difference was, what's the default? We're trying to create a default mechanism with children that Judaism is their default. And the way to do that is with behaviors. Training. So that's the first element. The second element tonight is the perspective that we want our children to have about Judaism, and this is key, and this is absolutely essential to their opting in, staying in, and becoming self-sufficient Jews. So I want to give an example of this. So anyone who's married knows that marriage is not always, and if you've been married and are not married anymore, you may know this even more. Marriage ain't always easy. It's not easy. You got to work at it. Having children and raising children is not easy. It takes work, and it takes a lot of things away from yourself, like private time in the bathroom. That's just one that comes to mind, right? We were talking about it last night. Someone was over at my house last night. We were talking about the fact that he runs to work in the morning just to be able to have a minute of peace and quiet to use the facilities. It's the only place he's got a second. And I totally can relate, right? There are so many. It's hard.